In this segment, number 8, Rendering in 3D Models of the Parabola Master Bath Project, we're going to explore the different techniques used in managing the 3D model and how you can get different renderings, including artistic rendering and ray trace rendering. So let's go ahead and go into the program and get started. Back in the program, the first thing I want to talk about are layer sets. Layer sets are used to control what you see either in a 2D view or in a 3D view. If I move over and look at the layer sets that I have on my floor plan view, I like to create several different styles and setups for this to get the exact view that I'm after. If you notice when I change to the kitchen and bath set that I've set up, that will automatically update and include my floor plan notes, callouts, and my section views. You can manage your layer sets through the Layer Set Management tool using a copy tool, and what I like to do is make several copies. I can then save that into my profile plan and use that for future work. It becomes a nice template, so I only have to spend the time up front. Let me change my layer set here to the ceiling layer set, and you'll see it update. And then I'll come over to the 3D view and let's make the same type of change. Notice that currently I have the camera view with no soffits and some lighting. Let me change that to just the camera view set and you can see the difference. So when I'm looking down into the 3D model with the soffits on and some of the ceiling electrical, whether it's recessed can or the lights that are hanging in the ceiling, you'll notice that in this view it's very difficult to see exactly what you're after. So by controlling your model through layer sets, let's go back and turn that on, no soffits, no lighting, then you can actually see into the model. Notice that I do have some lights in here with my pendant lights, and what I've done here, let's open up that light, is on my layer I actually have 3 different layers. I have electrical, which this bath pendant is on, the wall mount is on, and then I have my recessed cans on a layer, and then I have my ceiling mount on a layer. Depending on the situation, I want to hide those from view. If you've ever done a 3D view and you see what I call the spaceship view, let's go ahead and turn that layer on. I've turned that recessed light layer on. You see these spaceships, what I call spaceships. They're just the recessed cans from above. So I'll just take and highlight those items and turn that layer off and put them on their own layer. I always have a layer for electrical cans. Turn that layer off and then it will hide them from display. That way you can get exactly the right view that you're after. Okay. Sometimes also, if you want to get in and get the right type of view for your rendering, let's highlight this wall. Another trick that I'll do, looks like I have to hit the tab key to get into that wall, is I'll open up that wall temporarily and set it to be invisible. And then that way I can get right in. Let's also turn off our wall framing here. That way you can get right in and get the right type of shot that you're after. Let's temporarily just remove that from view. You can get right in and get the right type of view, especially for a bathroom. They're tight spaces, and by toggling a wall invisible, you can set that and get into that space. You can think of each shot that you're after as kind of a photo shoot and trying to save your right camera. Let's take a look at a couple of renderings I've created here. So here's a ray trace render that I've used kind of as my main rendering to represent this project. And you'll notice that I have the right glow on my lights. I've accessorized the designs with things in the shower, towels near the sink, accessories on the wall. All of those little touches can help sell the job, as well as the items below the cabinet. Those are all found in the library. And what I've done is I've saved each of these camera views. Let me show you a couple more. Here's another view that I've taken. And I've set up the scene. I also, it's difficult to see, but underneath of the shower, just above the logo on Chief Architect, I put light sources underneath the shower bench to illuminate some spots that are dark, and I'll show you how I've done that in this project. Here's the same scene, only a little bit further back. You can see the lighting actually underneath that shower bench and how that looks. On the right hand side over here, where actually the water closet's located, I've opened the door. That's a setting that you can click on the door under the options panel and just say render is open. Let's see what else I have here. And then what I've done here is I just copied my vanity sink out and rendered it as a separate object so I can show that specific element for the design. So let's go back into our 3D camera and take a look at some of what I've done here. Each time you have a camera, they can be saved by going into the menu for 3D and save active camera. This is a great way to preserve an exact scene that you like. If we save this active camera, let's go ahead and give it a name. Well, it's camera 2 right now. If I open up the project browser, you can see all of my saved cameras. So here's camera 2. What I'll do is give it a particular name. And then I can reactivate any of those cameras simply by double-clicking on them. Also, if you go back to the floor plan view, you'll be able to see all of those cameras by turning those layers on. And it's pretty messy, but all you have to do is double-click on those, and by naming them, you can easily recreate a view. Let's explore what I've done here with some of my cameras as well. If you open up one of these cameras and you look at the layer, I have it on the layer for cameras, and if you look at some of my other layers, I also set up my elevation cameras to try to avoid the clutter. If I turn those on, you'll see the additional clutter on my plan, and they add more detail or add more clutter in there. If I change my plan set to just the kitchen and bath plan set, then you only see my elevation cameras and my current active camera that is open in this other window over here. So by saving your cameras, you can go in and recreate things. Now, when you save a camera, let me close that project browser. When you save a camera, it will take on any attributes that you may have set. So for example, if I save my camera, let's change our style to a vector style view here. If I now close this camera, it will ask me if I want to save it, and then when I reopen this camera, it will come in with the vector style camera. Likewise, if I change it to the technical illustration view, it will also save that camera with that exact view that I have open. Let's open back up the project browser. My cameras are broken up into overview cameras, my first floor cameras, and then my cross-section cameras. If you look at the framing overview, let's double-click on one of these cameras and see what I've saved here. If you rotate around, you can see that I've saved this with a particular set of layers. Notice that my layer set up here is 3D framing set. If you want to create a specific one, I've got a 3D framing set that just shows the roof and the ceiling, one that just shows walls. So if you like a layer set, just open up the layer set management, use the copy tool. When you hit copy, you can create a copy of it and then choose which layers that you want to be different than the one you just copied. You can either turn things on or off. And it's very handy to be able to isolate and save particular views so you're not opening up your 3D model and making changes as you did this. One of the things that I wanted to show in this view was to be able to come down here and isolate where the blocking was for our fixtures. Also, if you rotate around, see if I can get this right type of view in here. A little bit tough to navigate. But you can also see my plumbing view down here, where I want to make sure that the floor framing has access for the toilet. And I also put a solid underneath of the toilet just to show how the plumbing goes through. And again, I've managed all of this through the different layer sets and turning what's on and off through the model. The other thing that I've done is you can see the detail for supporting our shower bench. I wanted some additional blocking underneath of that. The cross sections that we saved on our plan are also underneath the cross sections category from your project browser. If you double click on the cross section view, again it will open up that camera and now you can see that exact section view. You can get the same result by double clicking on the camera from your plan view and being able to open it. The project browser allows you to see that specifically by just double clicking it and running it through the project browser. Now, the project browser is specific to Chief Architect Premiere, so if you have the interiors version, you'll have to use the plan view to get access to these cameras. Now, one of my favorite cameras here is the Vanity Through Closet. If I double click on that and open up that camera, let's close our project browser as well. And let me toggle that wall back to a regular wall back in our plan view. Turn the layer on for invisible walls, and then I just need to select that wall and turn it back on from invisible. Let's go back to the camera view here. A lot of cameras open. Now let's talk about getting the right shot. This is called our standard render view. And in your standard render view, you can use a final view, and that will clean up the view. Also in your preferences, let's take a look at the preferences under render. The preview options, you notice that in my preview, which I'm in a preview mode, is my software edge smoothing is set to 0. And that's not going to give me the best view, but it's going to be the fastest response time when I'm rotating my camera and navigating around. Final view, I have that cranked up to 100%, and I specifically have to click the final view on that to clean up the aliasing of edges. So anytime you notice I have reflections on in mirrors, that's not too computationally intensive. But I like to run mine at 0 because I like to be able to rotate around and get very close, but that means I have jagged edges. And all I have to do is click this Final View tool right here, Final View, and that will clean it up. Now a few of the cameras may not have the Final View option. If I change to Vector View, looks like my electrical cans are bright red. Notice that the Final View camera isn't on there, so I would have to go into my preferences and change that setting for the render to be at 100%, and then it will clean it up for me. And by the way, if you want to change the color of the outline of those elements, you can open up that layer and just make that change. Notice that it's bright red. We'll just set that to a darker gray, and then that will clean that up. Let me change the camera view to our technical illustration view. And again, I'm using this at 100%, so using Final View isn't going to make any changes on that for the most part when I set that up. And if I save the camera, obviously it's going to save those settings in there. But we have a new feature in version X7 that you can use. This isn't necessarily the best example, but under export, you can now export images. My screen resolution is 1920 by 1080. I can actually export this image at a number much greater than my screen resolution. And you can also increase the dots per inch. Usually 72 is what you use on the web, but a minimum of 300 might be what you're going to use for print. So this is helpful to get a nice large image if you're going to be putting out any sort of print advertising or print literature. And you can also export it with a transparent background. Again, this isn't the best image for it, but imagine if you had an overhead view, what I call the dollhouse view. You can then create a transparent background and then overlay that on other artwork. So here's an example of that. This is the what I call a dollhouse view. We've overlaid it on a piece of artwork, and just using the transparent background, it saves one additional step of bringing that into a photo editing application. Picture export is new to version X7 with the ability to go beyond your screen resolution for the standard renderings, increase the resolution that's required for higher print things, and also select for the transparent background. Let me cancel out of that. And let me return back to our standard render view here. One of the things that many people do when they ray trace render. Ray trace render is the camera next to it. That's the ability to get high resolution images that interact with light. And you'll notice this is my ray trace version of that saved camera that we're looking at. So you'll get reflections off of the countertop, how materials interact with lights, and many other settings that you can do. In fact, let me show you another scene that I like. Here's where you can see a little bit more of the reflection off of the top of the countertop. This is coming from the blue sky out of the window. You'll notice in the shower door here my reflections as well as off of the floor. So this is ray trace rendering. And when you go through the ray trace, one of the things that I find people should consider doing is launching the assistant. And if you go through this, it's going to ask you if you want indoor or outdoor. And if you want a nice rendering that's going to give you or good representation, always select high quality. Even if it's due to time, just change the size of the rendering. Always select high quality because it's going to give you a crisper look on your metals, a crisper look on your reflections, and it's really the metals. If you've ever done a ray trace render and your stainless steel or chrome comes out black, you got to select the high quality. Let's go through and go to the next scene. Here's where you can set the resolution size of it, and again the print quality of it. This is all standard. And if you're after something quick and you just want to preview it, just set that to something quite low, and it will be a much smaller project and go through much quicker, and it'll give you better results. And once you're happy with that, then you can increase that back to what you want. And now you can select if you want focal blur. You think about if something's close when you're taking a photo, it will give you some blur. And so there's a few more settings in there. And then you can save what you want. I'm going to cancel that. When you ray trace, it's going to then go through the process and go through a number of passes. It's going to continue with a number of passes until you stop it. At any point you can export it. In fact, let me start a ray trace here so you can see what I'm talking about. Well, I have the ray trace running. You can see at the bottom of the screen it's been running for a little over 11 minutes. It's completed 6 passes, and it needs to resolve what's going on in the mirror. I found that interior ray traces take quite a bit longer than exterior ray traces. If you look at my finished ray trace, you can see the improved quality of it. This sort of a ray trace, I'm going to let it run for a few hours. In fact, it may just be the last thing I do at night. Kick off the ray trace and let it run overnight and save it off. Speaking of saving it, there's a few options here. Obviously, you can save it and put it out that way. There's also a setting here where you can change, bring the dialog over here, you can change the tone mapping, and there's quite a few adjustments here. If you, again, it depends on the rendering. Sometimes I'll click this use tone mapping, change my contrast or my brightness to 60%, and that really works well for a lot of ray trace renderings in my case. But in this one, using tone mapping seems to have the best results. So again, these are image properties you can modify. You can only do this while before the ray trace is completed. Once it's completed, then you can bring it into photo editing if you want to do any photo editing to it. One of the things that I like to do in the ray trace, if we go back into the camera here, is when you run the ray trace, if you hit the edit button here, save the image file, and then it allows you to save the file as you're ray tracing it. So each pass and each iteration it will save it. So if your computer has an issue, it will automatically save that file. If it's run for a few hours, you won't lose any of your work. We cancel that out. One thing I'd like to point out about ray trace rendering, if you go to our website and open up the training videos section, we have a video series on 3D modeling and rendering, or you can search ray trace rendering in here. Towards the bottom of this playlist there are a few videos, but here's a longer video on ray tracing tips and techniques, and it goes through step by step all of the different settings in much more detailed fashion than I'm covering briefly in this video. So I'd encourage you to use these resources to learn more about how to get the most out of your rendering techniques. Another tool that I like to use is what's called the Adjust Materials definition. If you click on that and click on a surface, under the Properties section, you'll get all the information about this material. There are several settings that you can choose. If you go down through the different settings, in the help file it will describe some of these settings that you can get more information out of them. And then you can also go in here and adjust all of these settings. Bump map is going to give you a texture. You could think of the tile on my floor down here. If I put a bump map on that, that's going to basically take the grout line and recess that slightly so it makes it look like it has more of a texture on it. Again, you can refer to the help and the videos on that. One thing that I find very helpful in understanding what these settings are, if you come over to your preview window, there's actually a show ray trace view right here, and you can do a mini ray trace. I'm just going to go ahead and click that. It might take a minute because I have the indoor high quality, which is the over high res or high definition view in here. But that's going to go through a few iterations of that teapot and show exactly the way that setting is. So if I have questions about how reflective or how rough a material is, very helpful to quickly dial in exactly what material you have. I've heard many people have issues with stainless steel. This is a quick way to do that, and many times the issue with stainless steel is because they didn't use the high quality option. So try to use this setting. All it is a drop down right here. You can also change what it's applied to. So if you want to apply it to a different object, then you can choose those different objects. Let's go ahead and cancel out of this. Let's talk a little bit about lighting. You'll notice my light here. Let's go ahead and open that. Slide this over here a little bit. There's a tab here, a panel here for light data. Again, you can refer to the help manual and understand what kinds of lights these are. Parallel light, spotlight, you can change those, how much the intensity is. Okay, you can also customize that. Dialog keeps showing up on my other screen. And you can go in through a lot of details. Think of rendering as like a photo shoot. You can spend as much or as little time as you want. Many of our lights come with all of the defaults in there that usually look good, but you can go and customize those to create the exact look you're after. You can change the color of your light. Think about an evening shot where you have the orange, yellow glow of the sun. You could come in here and change the color of that light. Okay. And the other thing that you can do too is turn on the show position in camera view, and it will show you where that light source is. And I just need to change my camera to the standard camera. And now I can see exactly where that light source is. If you notice that you can actually change that offset on where the light source is. Again, if you bring up the render view, you see how I have a glow and where that light source is located? That's because I've made sure where I've centered that light source, and now you can see that in this view. So it's a very helpful tool to do that. There may be times when either natural light or lights from elements aren't enough. Let me go back into my floor plan view. And what I've done, if you look at my floor plan, let me open up an image for you. Underneath my shower bench, I could have put puck lights or a strip light in there, but what I did instead of actually putting a physical light is I put a light source in there. And light sources are nothing more than, think of a photo shoot that has a flash on it. It's a temporary light that's just going to provide more lighting for you. If I go back to my floor plan and I turn on those light sources, let me just find my light sources, turn those on to be displayed. You can see where I've placed those underneath of my bench here. And to place a light source, you just find those underneath 3D, lighting, add lights. And if I click and place it, it's going to click and place a light source. If I click and drag slightly, it's going to create a spotlight. And then if I keep dragging, it's going to create a parallel light. All of them have different settings. Let me just grab that light here. And this parallel light, you can see that again it has the same types of light settings that you would with a regular light. Parallel light is going to shoot infinitely parallel light, whether it's on one floor or all floors. So again, refer to the help and or videos to learn more about these lighting techniques that you can use to create just the right scene. And think of your lighting and your 3D modeling as just doing your staging and your photo shoots. You can spend as much time as you want on it. It may help you sell more jobs, build up your portfolio, make sure your clients are on the same page, make them excited about the project before it starts, and I hope you have fun creating the renderings. The next portion of the video will be talking about our construction drawings. It's the last segment, and we'll go through the steps to create those drawings based on this plan we've been working on. One last point about ray trace rendering. You can download this sample plan from the website and you can look at my material settings, my light settings. Sometimes that is helpful as a guideline. Let me pull up our website here. I'll just show you where I'm going to place it. Underneath our user center, you can go to our samples gallery. You'll be able to pull that plan down, and you can find other plans on here and watch the video or download the plan as well. Again, that's under the samples area. You can download that and explore how I've created this ray trace rendering and the saved cameras and my material properties and light properties. And I hope you'll find that helpful.